Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today I picked a topic that's a little bit difficult to talk about, and we're going to be talking about the meaning of life. Now, I wouldn't say that there's a clear answer to this. Maybe life is meaningless, but there is ways that we can live life in a meaningful way, if that makes sense. But before we get to that point, we need to analyze in a certain sense where we have been as a society, where we are now, and what are the steps that we need to take to reach that enlightened or meaningful way of life state. So, in previous times, we had religions, we had God, and we had gods to ground us. The things that we did were directed towards them, and we also received directions from them. This gave our life a grounding. Okay, whoever wasn't on that boat, so to speak, was living in a materialistic way. Materialistic, not in the sense that we understand it today, but in the philosophical stance of materialism, where reality is just biological and mechanical. Now, what happened when science started progressing was that we couldn't accept the idea that there was an all powerful creator that put us here. We couldn't reconcile the idea of our existence with that of God's. When Nietzsche said the phrase, God is dead and we killed him, that's basically what he meant. He didn't mean that we literally went and killed God. He meant that the role that God played in our lives to ground us, that role, he cannot play it anymore because we can't give him that belief. But we have to remember that religions, God, and gods are projections of psychic energy. I know this sounds a little bit iffy, but what this means is that as humans, we have this great angst, this great desire to connect to something larger than us. You'll see this repeated in all cultures. That something larger than us is actually within us. But historically, we've projected that outwards and we've created images that serve as a placeholder to connect to. Okay, which is great, like it gives life some traction, it gives it a meaning. But with the age of secularism, which is the one that we are now, where we don't accept the idea of gods, so to speak, that psychic energy that's projected is still floating around. So what happens is that it goes on to the next thing available. So our gods today are our work, our partner, our vanity, and our substance of abuse. There's a million things. We don't individuate that energy. The thing about projecting that to a god is that it's an imaginary entity. So at the end, we're paying respect and trying to connect to something imaginary, and it leads back up to us. The problem that we have today is that the devotion that we give are to things that are actually real. So they don't reconnect it back to us. It just stays on that point, if that makes sense. So, how do we fix this, basically? There's two ways for you to get in a place where you can accept that you've been projecting outward these things. You can either go through a tragedy, or you can have experienced so much of life and realize that it's not sufficient to fulfill that desire to reconnection to that something larger than yourself. Normally, at the beginning, that'll put you in a deep depression, but eventually you'll realize that everything is a little bit absurd. Nothing really makes sense. We have all these people running around devoting themselves to false idols, and you look at everything and you say, well, this is just meaningless. The the concept of everything that I've mentioned in the past 30 seconds can be englobed under one word, and that word is the absurd. Realizing that life is just a game, it's just funny. Now, there's only two ways out of the absurd. One is death, and the other is hope. So, death can go in two routes. One of the routes is suicide, and the other route is continuing to live life as if you had decided to kill yourself. Nihilism, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to hurt a lot of people who love you. We want to keep you around. And the other solution is hope. In order for someone to have hope, one has to have a historical agency in their life. They have to understand that they can actually influence their life development, albeit in a small scope. You can't control everything. So hope begins by envisioning a different future within the constraints of your circumstances, and then tackling these future with three elements. The first of which is revolt. Revolt not in an angry way. Revolt in a way of, well, you know what? If all of this is meaningless, I am not gonna quiet down and just accept everything that comes my way, but I'm gonna rise up and I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Revolt happens when Sisyphus pushes his rock all the way up the hill, from that famous Greek myth. And as the rock is rolling back down, and he's watching it roll down, and he has to make the decision to go back down and push it back up, and that's part of his curse, pushing the rock up endlessly and having it come down endlessly. Revolt happens in the moment when Sisyphus decides to go down the hill, push the rock back up again the hill. It's defiance in the face of the absurd, and it liberates a tremendous amount of energy. Freedom or liberty is actually constrained liberty or limited freedom. Nietzsche talks about this at length in his Gay Science and Will to Power. And instead of talking about Nietzsche, I'm going to give an example from Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis. Herbie Hancock was a pianist, Miles Davis played the saxophone or something like that. They were playing a show somewhere in Germany, and Herbie Hancock was accompanying Miles Davis' jazz solo with the piano. Basically, Herbie Hancock would play a set of preset chords, and Miles Davis would respond with notes on the sax. There was one moment during the concert where Herbie Hancock pressed the wrong chord. He said it in an interview. It just didn't feel right. Something was off. Miles Davis looked over at him, paused for a second, and then continued on playing in a way that made the wrong chord sound right. And that is how we have to look at our freedom. Herbie Hancock making the mistake playing the chord is life changing our circumstances. Miles Davis working around the wrong chord and making it sound nice, making sense of it, is us responding to the changes of our circumstances. That's the kind of freedom that we have. We can't do everything and everything, but within our scope of influence, there's plenty of things that we can do. And we must always remember that. And the third thing is passion. Once we realize that life is sort of like an absurd game, we have to tell ourselves, well, if it's a game, I'm going to play this game in the most interesting way that I can. And we have to go at it with passion, just with relentless passion, you know? It's difficult to craft your own path. I know this firsthand, you know? When I was young, I had a very set path set out for me, and as I grew older, my mind didn't want to accept it, but my body would tell me through symptomology that it just wasn't right for me. And within the constraints that I have, you know, because I have constraints like everyone else, financial constraints, cultural constraints, I try to move in a direction that is closer to what I want. Because, heck, if life is an absurd game, I'm gonna have fun. But fun doesn't mean going out partying like crazy every weekend. Fun, or a good way to live life, is dedicating your life to a task that sounds interesting to you, you know? That you can make a difference in the world or for yourself. And if all this just goes in through one ear and comes out through the other, I would just want you to remember one thing. And this is a quote from a German philosopher that teaches in Kentucky, but I love it. And he says, think about your life hoping that there will be many moments in it, not all of them, because that's impossible, but many moments in them where you can say about them, there's no place I'd rather be. There's no person I'd rather be with. And there's no thing I'd rather be doing. And with that, I close for today. I'm going to recommend a book like I always do at the end of my videos. And today it's going to be Braving the Wilderness by Brené Brown. Brené, if you ever listen to one of my videos, let's have coffee together. I love your stuff. And nothing. Everyone, have an awesome day. You know, live the day in revolt. Live it in liberty and live it with passion, because goddamn, you could die tonight. Remember that. Bye.